Hey guys, Comic Boom here to do a quick rundown of my top 10 writers for 2021. And I'm curious, you can let me know in the comments below who your favorite writers are in 2021. Just a couple of things up front. I think it's very, very important that I disclose my biases before I give you my top 10 list. And that is, I mostly read I read a lot of DC this year, and I read a lot of independent work. I read a lot of Image comics. I didn't read a lot of Marvel. And while I do have at least think one or two, I guess technically two or three Marvel writers on the list, I maybe could have more Marvel writers that could have made the top 10 if I read them. I've heard a lot of good things about some of them. And I've sort of skim read a lot of Marvel. I get a lot of Marvel. You know, I do actually read digitally a lot of Marvel comics over, like, not every week, but in blocks over a period of time, because I get a lot of the Marvel comics free digitally anyway. I don't find myself enjoying a lot of them because I'm not into Marvel characters, quite frankly. And that tells me a little bit about the writing, because the writers aren't making them interesting to me. The vast majority of them. I'm not into Spider-Man. I'm not into anything to do with the X-Men. I'm not into the Avengers. I just don't find any of those things, or the current storylines aren't really compelling to me. But I do have some Marvel on the list, which I will get to. Some writers are really hitting it pretty good over there at Marvel. In particular, Kelly Thompson. She always keeps me at Marvel in some capacity, and Chip Sardosky with Daredevil and Devil's Reign, and of course Tom Taylor with Dark Ages. That's good stuff. And in any event, so I do have more of a. I got to tell you that even as great as Image is this year, a lot of good independent titles. The writing was good, but the fact of the matter is that wow, the writers on my list here just continue to blow me away, and it was so tough to make choices this year. There was a couple of obscure writers that I could have put on here, but I just don't read enough of their work to justify it, and that's my bias. So there's probably more of a DC bias on this list. So keep that in mind. If you're going to be making comments, and feel free to enlighten me about Marvel writers, or about an independent writer that I missed. I'm all for checking out new titles and seeing other writers in a different light. So feel free to enlighten me. But anyways, without further ado, let's get to it. Number 10 on my list is Ed Brubaker. This is a guy, I started reading his Reckless books, and it is a Reckless book, and the lead character's last name is in fact Reckless, and he's a detective in the 1980s, and he had his formative years in the 60s, and he's sort of like an older sort of hippie character in a way, with 1960s sensibilities, but being a PI in the 1980s. And between Destroy All Monsters, Friend of the Devil, Reckless, these are all really great titles. It's crime noir. It's something that I really love. It's one of the reasons why I really love Tom King's Human Target. I like that. I also like the classic James Bond. It's actually one of the reasons why even though I was going to say, that's one of the reasons why I wear a fedora. I like fedoras because I like the old sort of 40s, 50s, and 60s style. Now, don't get me wrong. This is 1980s, this book, but Ed Brubaker writes in a crime noir style that he's written a lot of past books like Fade Away and and just his criminal stories to begin with. He's written a lot of like classic stories with the 40s, 50s feel, and hence my love for the fedora, but or one of the reasons. But in any event, this is 1980s stuff, but it's told with that Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips sensibility. This is really good. If you see any of this in hardcover form, guys, pick it up. You don't need. You pick up any one. It's like reading a James Bond novel, or reading a James Bond comic, or watching a James Bond movie, or just an old classic. Any one of these, even though all their continuities, there are some linkages between them, you really don't need to read them all at once to understand what's going on. Very well written. It's definitely a high recommend. Ed Brubaker continues. And Sean Phillips, because he's the story maker. His art is so associated with Ed Brubaker that really it's the two of them together. So my apologies to Sean Phillips. Your art's fantastic. Ed Brubaker without you, that would be like Abbott without Costello, right? Come on. In any event, coming in at number 9, Kelly Thompson. I mentioned that I don't read a lot of Marvel anymore, but Black Widow. Good Lord, Black Widow with Kelly Thompson writing it. Elena Casagrande. I wrote down how to pronounce that name because I always pronounce it wrong, but I believe I said that right. Elena Casagrande on the art is just a fantastic title. It's written so well, and it feels like a Black Widow. It feels like you're reading a Black Widow movie. I mean, it's just, and even, it's funny. The name of the artist, Elena Casagrande, almost sounds like it was she. Almost sounds Russian, like she could be a character in the very comic that she's drawing. And the art is absolutely fantastic. Kelly Thompson also writes Captain Marvel. And Kelly Thompson has managed to do something with Carol Danvers that I would not have thought possible. She's actually, in my eyes, not in everyone's eyes, I know that, but in my eyes, she's actually redeemed Captain Marvel for me, Carol Danvers. Coming out of Civil War II, slowly since Civil War II over the last, whatever that is, 4 or 5 years, I've slowly moved more and more away from Marvel to now I'm only down to like 3 titles that I read regularly. Well, actually, I should correct that. It's probably more like 5 now, because I might get into Venom because Ram V is going over there. So we'll see, right? Ram V is on this list too, but he's a little farther up. But Kelly Thompson is just fantastic, and I love her. I mean, I love her. She gives great interviews, and she really gets Captain Marvel. She's redeemed Carol Danvers in my eyes. Carol Danvers is less of a bitch than ever before. It's imbued with humor and fun, and she's a wonderfully flawed character. And Kelly Thompson isn't afraid to really push the boundaries of Carol Danvers, both in terms of what the mistakes she makes as a person, as a woman, and as a character, and also with her powers. Kelly Thompson is being very creative and imaginative. And same with her Black Widow is just plain fun. I wish we had, actually, I would love Kelly Thompson at some point to come over to DC and write Catwoman. That would be awesome. I would love that. Kelly Thompson, I would hope DC would have the foresight to recruit you. Of course, we do have Teenie Howard writing Catwoman coming up, so hopefully Teenie Howard, she'll do a good job on, my fingers are crossed that she'll do a good job on Catwoman she's coming from Marvel. And we'll see. But in any event, Kelly Thompson, great job on Black Widow and Captain Marvel, man. You made my list. All right, so coming in at number 8, Robert Kirkman. This guy is another one of those guys. He's like Ed Brubaker. He's so good that people just forget that sometimes they just forget about him because he's like a staple. He's almost like Jeff Johns, which is another writer who actually didn't make my list. Jeff Johns did not make my list because I felt he only wrote one title this year. He didn't really deserve it. But then I'm a hypocrite because Robert Kirkman, I've only been reading one title from Robert Kirkman this past year. That's not entirely true. I did kind of been reading some Walking Dead, but I continue to have appreciation for Robert Kirkman. This firepower is just, I love it. It's excellent. And I never thought, a family of, essentially kind of like a family of martial artists, but great, wonderful origin, great character-driven tale. This was a series that I got into where my retailer actually gave me the trade paperback that Kirkman through Image sent out the trade paperback of the first 6 issues all at once first, and my retailer borrowed it to me and I read it. I loved it, and I've been with the series ever since. I'm really hoping that at some point Netflix or somebody picks this up. I just think this is martial arts fun, and it's character driven. That's what I love it. I really like it. If I know that this particular image that I have of issue 7 here, it might look ridiculous to you guys who've never read Firepower, and you're thinking, it's just a bunch of ninjas hopping and jumping around. It's actually much more sophisticated than that. There's actually a rich history here, and it's believable. And Firepower refers to the ability to access literally shooting fire from your hands if you reach a certain level of, I guess, Nirvana-like martial arts perfection. And the lead character is able to do that, and it's a rarity. And of course, he ends up back in America, where he is, of course, he's sought after. And then there's all kinds of other machinations that are going on, subplots, character agendas. I mean, it's a fun read, guys. it's not getting enough attention. I don't know why. And it's partly my fault because I don't have enough time to review all the comics that I love, but I talk about them in these year-end things. I mostly just review on my channel DC, but kudos to Robert Kirkman, man. You deserve to be on this list. All right, number 7, Scott Snyder. Noctera is great. His Noctera series is great. He came off of Scott Snyder came out of DC Death Metal. I didn't like Death Metal, okay? I really didn't like the end of his Justice League run. I didn't like his Death Metal. I really, truly believe that Scott Snyder was not in his element at DC other than his Batman. He was too dark. But those same qualities that make me feel that he wasn't a good fit for DC, just period, other than his Court of Owls and Batman, and his Swamp Thing run, because those are particular characters that are normally darker anyway. Scott Snyder is perfectly fit for his comicsology with his Night of the Ghoul, his Clear, and his Noctera. I mean, good Lord, Noctera through Image, fantastic tale. It's a darker tale about a future where, well, the world is dark and there's these creatures that come out at night, and of course, the lead character, it's very metaphorical. You shine light upon the darkness to destroy the darkness, to destroy the monsters. You got Night of the Ghoul, which is about, my friend Jason and I, through the Comic Source podcast, we try to review every issue of Night of the Ghoul. Scott Snyder collaborating with Francisco Francavilla on the art of Night of the Ghoul. It's fantastic. Really horror-like. The story set in the 1940s and the present about a new up-and-coming filmmaker wanting to find an old film called Night of the Ghoul, and he wants to find the original director and get to the secret of what the ghoul is about in the film and find the last vestige of the film. But meanwhile, there's other horrific elements in our backstory that permeates the entire narrative. It's fantastic. Clear is set in the future where all technology has gotten to a point where all of us, we see the world through different eyes, through veils, and these veils are created for us through the technology in our phones and in our headsets, and it's hard to differentiate between reality, what is real and what is virtual, and the consequence that it has for society. And it's a very human story about a man who's lost his son and then ultimately his wife, who was in charge of a lot of creating kind of these veils, and his quest to try to find some meaning in his life and his own kind of sense of redemption while keeping his mind sane and in the real world and not getting lost in the virtual world. And hence the name of the story, Clear. What is clarity? How do you obtain it in a virtual world where it's not clear what reality actually is? Scott Snyder has done a fantastic job, and Clear is Francis Manapul does the art on Clear. Great collaborations. There's just really good stuff here, guys, and it's something that these are just 3 examples from Scott Snyder. He also does Undiscovered Country with Charles Soule, and I know I'm missing one, but and I apologize, but he's done a really good job here. And Undiscovered Country, I'm less of a fan of with Undiscovered Country's collaboration with Charles Soule. However, it is a longer form narrative, and it's good. It's a little bit more complex, and I haven't really been following it. I sort of stopped reading it a couple issues ago, and so I'm behind. But it's entertaining enough, but it's nothing compared, in my view, to these 3 titles that are my favorite from Scott Snyder. That's why I put them up: Clear, Night of the Ghoul, and Noctera. Check any one of these out. Go to Comixology in particular, guys. Check it out. Night of the Ghoul, Clear. All right. Coming in at number 6, Tom Taylor. I mean, is this really a surprise? I cheated a bit here. Deceased Dead Planet was from 2020. Suicide Squad was from 2019, 2020. But the rest here are from 2021. Dark Knights of Steel just started a couple months ago. It's on issue 2 or 3. 2, I think. Nightwing, his Dark Ages at Marvel I'm reading. And I don't read a lot of Marvel, but it's accessible. It's out of continuity. And anything that's out of continuity at Marvel, you can pretty much bet is better than anything else at Marvel. That's just the way I find Marvel. I'm just glad if I see a Marvel comic and somebody tells me it's out of continuity, I'll always check it out. Because if it's out of continuity, I have a much better chance of not getting lost in it. Because Marvel as a whole, I just find to be an increasingly inaccessible group, just a comic book publishing company in general. And you might say, hey, Comic Boom, what the hell are you talking about? You like DC Comics. DC Comics is a mess right now. And you'd be surprised. DC Comics actually this past year has had a lot of miniseries. It's much more accessible. There's more creative freedom. It's less beholden to continuity. The DC Omniverse thing is actually working. And I think it's going to continue to get better and better. And that's just my opinion. I kind of going to contradict myself. DC has its issues, but I'm going to do another video on that. But in any event, that's my bias. What can I say? His Batman Dark Knight, I love Tom Taylor's take on Batman. It reminded me of a Frank Miller-like Batman in the future. It was really good. His Superman Son of Kal-El, I like his characterization of John Kent as being more socially proactive as opposed to his father Kal-El. He's not afraid to interfere in world affairs. He's rocking the boat. John Kent is going to be making mistakes. He's going to be screwing up, and that's a good thing because he's young and he's naive and he's going to make mistakes, and that creates good stories and good drama. I don't have to like John Kent. I think John Kent is making mistakes. I disagree with what Tom Taylor is having John Kent do, but John Kent is a young Superman trying to find his way, and he's making the mistakes that I think make a lot of sense in today's world, and I'm really enjoying it. Nightwing, I love the new mythology, the new history he's adding to the history of Dick Grayson. His collaboration with Bruno Redondo on Nightwing is just fantastic. And his Dark Knights of Steel is, man, it's Game of Thrones meets DC Comics, man. What the hell? He's bringing that sort of injustice bit of sensibilities to it. He's already killed off some characters. I love what he's doing, setting up the whole thing centered around Kal-El and I guess Prince Kal-El, and of course Bruce Wayne character being like the half brother, the other son of Jor-El and Martha. Great setup, Game of Thrones like, excellent, fantastic. Tom Taylor, man, you're doing a good job. Coming in at number 5, Rick Remender. This is another guy that flies under the radar all the time, and I don't know why, but I just like this guy's writing. And I always go back between liking his writing to loving his writing. And this past year, I went to loving his writing again. I love the ending to Seven to Eternity. Seven to Eternity is a little bit too complex of a plot for me to explain it all here. But let's just say it is something. It's 17 issues long, Seven to Eternity. It took a long time to come out. But the art by Jerome Opeña, it took a long time to, I think, because of his art. Anyways, it's artistically, it's absolutely beautiful. It's so poignant, it's so powerful, and it's so tragic, the ending for the protagonist. But it really is a gut punch in the end in so many ways. But I love it. It's very well done. And I just encourage everyone to read all of it. The full 17 issues. Get the trades. If it comes out in hardcover, a full trade, paperback, or an omnibus of some kind, pick it up. Scumbag is Scumbag. Scumbag is actually a comic book, which is exactly what it sounds like. I mean, it's about a piece of garbage, a human garbage, drug-dealing addict, alcoholic, who treats everyone like garbage. And he ends up accidentally, through a ridiculous series of events, gets infected by a bunch of nanites, which were intended for a soldier super spy. And he ends up getting all these almost quasi-superhuman abilities, and he's, of course, recruited by a spy organization, and even though he's a piece of human garbage, he's a scumbag. He ends up saving the world a couple times. Scumbag is an insane comic, and it's a lot of fun. It's funny, it's politically incorrect, it's absolutely nonsensical, fantastical, and just crazy fun. And puts a smile on my face, what can I say? And A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance is something that he just came out this past year. I only read the first issue of that, but I thought I'd put it up there. I'm still trying to get a handle on it. I'm not entirely sure what it is. A lot of it, there was just a lot of action. It was just a lot of pictures, not a lot of exposition. So I'm not really sure what it is. But Rick Remender, he's one of those writers where you got to take your time to enjoy what he's doing and get into it. And so that's what I'm doing. But in any event, Seven to Eternity and Scumbag, I had so much fun with them this year. I had to put Rick on the list. And so, Rick, you're in at number 5, my friend. So coming in at number 4, Ram V. Ram V, man. I really enjoyed Ram V this year. My favorite Ram V writing this year was his writing of Swamp Thing. I really enjoyed how he, the characterization that for he did for the new avatar of the Green Levi Kame, and how what he brought to the mythology of Swamp Thing. I'd never read Swamp Thing before. I, I've. So I'm more familiar now with Swamp Thing because of Ram V. I'm now a Swamp Thing fan because of Ram V, and this the whole concept of the green and how the green permeates and gives strength to our ideas, the good ideas, and how the red and the rot can give rise to the bad ideas. And we got the pale wanderer and how the good ideas can endure, but so can bad ideas, and how he links the various metaphors and links the love and the power and the compassion of the earth to nature and to the swamp. Now, this is what Swamp Thing I am told does with all incarnations of Swamp Thing, whether it was Scott Snyder writing Swamp Thing or whether it was Alan Moore, there was always these themes that play out. So Ram V, I know I don't think he's done anything new there, but this was just a very well structured and paced story. The first 9 issues are great. I think I just read issue 10. It's been extended, his Swamp Thing, for 16 issues because he's that good. DC's giving him time to do that. The best part of Justice League is Justice League Dark and the Justice League 2022-2021 annual. Wasn't as good as I hoped, but the fact is that it was Justice League Dark, which was a backup feature in Bendis's Justice League, which basically saved the Justice League title. The Justice League under Bendis is awful. It's terrible. It's probably one of the worst DC titles stories out there. But the backup, the Justice League Dark title, those 8 pages written by Ram V, saved that comic book every month. It made it worth picking up just for his 8 pages alone, because of he understands the pacing and the care and the structure, and he knows how to weave an interesting tale of magic and sorcery between on a team level. And what's so amazing is that he's so good at writing just individual tales of that focus on one or two characters, which was the case with The Many Deaths of Layla Starr, which was essentially the story of a character who is born and grows up to discover the secrets to immortality and eliminates the need for death. And of course, God, then the CEO of a massive corporation called Existence, God then fires Death because Death is out of a job, and so Death then goes to confront, and this Death, of course, Layla Starr, the Many Deaths of Layla Starr, Death gets reincarnated, keeps coming back as this character, Layla Starr, who confronts this young man growing up who will one day create a cure for death and eliminate death. And it's a very poignant story. It's an interesting story. I wasn't that impressed with the ending, but getting there, I was a little disappointed with the ending, but this is what's so incredible about this. As disappointed as I was in aspects of the ending of The Many Deaths of Layla Starr, because I didn't think he nailed the landing, getting there was so thought-provoking that it made the journey worthwhile. And that's what I really enjoyed about it. His Catwoman was the best part of DC's Fear State. It was the most, I think, eloquently written, and it had the most interesting, I think, villain with Father Valley. Again, the ending was a little off. Father Valley was inconsistent as a villain, and at the end, I mean, there's some inconsistencies there, but Ram V is leaving Catwoman, so I don't think he could really flush out the way he thinks he wanted to. But in any event, Ram V, it's impressive. I'm going to be checking out Venom. I heard his Venom might not be that bad. He went to Marvel to write Venom. DC, how could you lose Ram V, man? What are you doing? Good Lord, it's bad enough you lost Tinny into Substack, but, thank God you nailed down the contract with Tom Taylor, right? At least you got that, DC. But in any event, I hope Ram V, DC can get him back to continue. They got him extended his contract, at least on Swamp Thing, which is good. But I'd like to see him on more titles for DC. But in any event, continuing on, number 3, Tom King. I've talked about Tom King before. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow is the best that Supergirl's been written. I think some of the best Supergirl stories, the most thought-provoking Supergirl stories, and frankly, the ones that really, I think, get to the heart of why Kara is so heroic and so amazing a character and so hopeful, despite witnessing the destruction of her world no less than 3 times while she was a teenager, overcoming all those things. the way that she's always been a hopeful and bright and positive character, but yet at times has been written with some anger and some angst and aggression, not by Tom King, but by other writers. This comic really actually explains all that. And you can understand why Kara, she's 21 years old when this series starts, and she goes to another planet to get drunk under a red sun. And while there, Crypto ends up getting basically shot with an arrow by a jerk by the name of the Krem of Yellow Hills. This same Krem character kills a young girl's father, who's a rock farmer of all things. And the entire series of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is Kara taking this young girl with her through the cosmos as they're chasing this genocidal maniac by the name of Krem of Yellow Hills, and the adventures they have along the way. Each individual issue is like an individual tale. And issue 3 of Supergirl, they confront bigotry and hatred and how poisonous it can be in a society that doesn't really recognize or come to terms with it. It reads like a one-shot. It's fantastic. It's one of my one-shot single issue stories of the year, which I'll be getting to. Fantastic. His Rorschach was unbelievable. It has the best ending to a series I've read probably in years. Rorschach number 12. Jorge Fornes on the art. Dave Stewart in the colors, fantastic. Human Target, fantastic guy. I feel like a 19. Greg Smallwood on the art. Something about Tom King, he always gets the greatest artists to work with him. Human Target is so much fun. It's so much fun. It's humorous. He nails the character. He nails the character moments. So, and this is what saves Tom King for me. Even at times where he writes characters in a way that maybe act different than they do under existing continuity. He understands the character moments, and he sets up good character moments that often can work very, very well. Now, of course, when he fails, he can fail spectacularly. I'm not a fan of his Batman run or his Heroes in Crisis, and Tom King is a divisive writer, but man, this year he nailed it, and I loved his Strange Adventures. I don't care if I didn't like Adam Strange anyway, but what he did with Adam Strange and Strange Adventures, I personally loved the series. I loved it. It ends with now we have a woman of two worlds, Alana. Hey man, I'm all for that. I wasn't a fan of Adam Strange anyway. And I don't even know if it's in continuity, but I know Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is in continuity. Tom King confirmed that in an interview with my friend Jace at the Comic Source. But in any event, Tom King, you did a great job this year. And by the way, guys, for any naysayers of Tom King, I know some of you think that just because you sell a lot of comic books, it doesn't mean that you're a good writer. But I can tell you that if you don't sell a lot of comic books, you often don't stay a writer for long. So Tom King sells a lot of comic books. And if you don't believe me, look at the sales charts. Look at the sales charts, guys. Tom King sells a lot of comic books. He sells more than most. He sells more than most every other writer on this list, with the exception of James Tynion. That's incredible. And yeah, more than Tom Taylor. All right, number 2, Chip Sardosky. Man, God, my favorite Chip Sardosky story of the year for DC was Justice League Last Stride. But my favorite overall series with Chip Sardosky for the entire year is Stillwater. His Image series, Stillwater. I love it. The idea of a town whose inhabitants, whose citizens never grow old, and they always heal. And they stay the age that they're at forever, unless they leave the boundaries of the town, after which, if they do, then they can die. And the way that creates sort of a new government, a new governance, a new municipality, how the people interact, how they've changed, how that reality affects the town over many decades. It's incredible. And the power that it gives to the children that never grow old, to the various demographic age groups, the different sex, the different sex, SECTS, that form, the different groups that form, and the way that the town governs itself. It's just so well played out, and the character work, it's just wonderful. Spider-Man Life Story was in 2020. 2021, we got another Life Story issue, and we got the hardcover of Spider-Man Life Story. I want to encourage people to go pick that up. Chip Sardosky, a life story of Spider-Man taken course over the entire life of Spider-Man, from beginning to middle to end. The ending was fantastic. With great power does indeed come great responsibilities, and wow, if you do that, you'll have lived a fantastic life, as evidenced by Spider-Man Life Story by Chip Sardosky. Daredevil by Chip Sardosky Wow, who would have thought that Elektra becoming Daredevil, while that may seem a little bit tropey, it worked spectacularly, and it's led into Devil's Reign. And Devil's Reign right now, it feels like a little bit like Civil War 2. So again, a little trope, again, little redundant, but it's fun, and frankly, it's done in a way that Chip Sardosky is in control of, and I just have complete trust in Chip Sardosky that I'm in his Devil's Reign for the long run, and I'm so happy with the work that he's done this past year. He's more than earned my trust and respect, and I'm going to stick with him through the completion of Devil's Reign. All right, so number one is no surprise. It's James Tynion the fourth. I mean, I didn't even put his Batman on this list, although I could have. I mean, his Batman could be on the list just for the fact that it was a spectacular seller all year long. And but his Joker is just fantastic as well. His Joker, which is basically a glorified James Gordon story. And I don't care because it's that good a story. His Department of Truth, I mean, I love conspiracies to begin with, and Department of Truth is littered with conspiracies, all wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in a real cool story, with a cohesive narrative. Who would have thought? My God, a conspiracy that makes sense. Wow. A Nice House on the Lake, fantastic series about an alien named Walter who chooses 10 of his best friends over the course of 30 years to save them from Armageddon and plant them nice and neatly by a nice house on the lake, hoping that they're all going to get along together. Little does he know that human beings are a little bit complex and that things don't always work out as planned. Something is killing the children, continues to kill the charts. Unbelievable. Great series, continues. That expanded into the House of Slaughter, which has by all marks, it continues to. I mean, I think the first issue of House of Slaughter ate up the sales charts. James Tynion, of course, left Batman. Unprecedented move in 2021. Who would have thought that a writer of Batman would give all that up to go and write on his own through Substack? That DC Comics lost their Batman writer, and that's probably one of the reasons why DC was quick to snap up Tom Taylor, nail Tom Taylor down for an exclusive, because they didn't want to lose Tom Taylor and they want to make Tom Taylor happy. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here moving forward. So all in all, guys, that's my list of my top 10 writers for 2021. Let me know what you think. Let me know your choices below. Let me know if you agree or disagree with anything that I said. And in the meantime, guys, have a happy new year going into 2022. And until next time, Comic Boom out.